Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and I'm so happy you're here. Today we're doing 5 Dollar Tree DIYs for your Christmas home decor. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For this Dollar Tree DIY, we're going to be using 6 wooden crates, a Christmas stem, and some red felt self-adhesive numbers. And so the first thing we're going to do is use our Waverly white chalk paint and just paint all 6 of my crates. And I started with a smaller brush so that I could kind of cut in and do the little corners and all the nooks and crannies. And then I'll go back in with a larger brush and get the flat surfaces and all around the sides. And then once my paint is completely dry, I'm going to use my multi-purpose cement from the Dollar Tree. And if I wasn't doing a video, I would actually just use the cement and clamp these together and let them sit overnight to get a really good hold. But since I'm doing this, I'm using my hot glue to get that immediate hold, so I can get going a little bit faster. Now these boxes are never made exactly the same or perfectly square, so you kind of have to fiddle around and move them until you get them to where they're pretty close, and try different sides so you can get a really good fit. And we're going to do 2 rows of 3. And now that everything's all put together, we're going to take our numbers and start laying them out and just go 1 through 24. This is obviously going to be an advent calendar, and I love these little numbers, first of all because they're red and it was the perfect red for Christmas, but they're self-adhesive, and this adhesive is no joke, so once you get it down, it's pretty much down for good. And I did have one of my numbers kind of go a little bit lower than I wanted, but it gives it a little whimsy. So we love embracing our mistakes. So now I'm going to take a Christmas stem and I'm just going to wrap that into a circle and twist it around at the top. And then to give it a little pretty snowiness, I'm going to take the tips off of some of the frosty greenery and just hot glue that right on top of my stem. Now I'm going to take a sweet little bow and hot glue that to the top of my wreath. And I should have mentioned I did measure to see how big to make my wreath so that it would slip into my squares perfectly and stay in place. So I wasn't sure what to do for the top, but you have so many options. I found this little red truck and a couple of small square blocks, and I'm going to attach my truck to the top of my advent calendar by marking where the wheels are so that my blocks won't show once I attach my truck. And then I'll just hot glue those to the top and then glue my truck to the front of those blocks. And usually I'll take off the jute twine hangers from any of our wood pieces, but in this case it was centered, and so it was perfect to use as the hanger for our piece. And here's how it turned out, and I think this is so adorable. This is a perfect way to count down the days until Christmas. I have it on the 1 for December 1st, which also happens to be our anniversary. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For this project, we're going to be using some jute twine, some small ornaments, buffalo check garland, and a wooden ornament, and some black yarn. And so the first thing I did was popped my little ornaments onto a skewer, and then just using my Waverly chalk paint and ink, I'm going to paint those black and set those aside in a piece of styrofoam to dry. And while those are drying, I'm going to cut my garland apart and just get those beads separated from the jute twine. And then I'll take a new piece of jute twine and thread a big needle and set that aside for when we're ready to string our beads. And then in order to turn our ornaments into beads, I'm going to take some wire cutters and just pop off that top, and then take my big needle and stick it into the hole and then straight through to the bottom, pound it a couple of times with a hammer so that it goes through, and then just string it onto my twine. And then I'll take my needle again and pop it into the styrofoam ornaments and pull that on, and we're making our garland. Now I got my big long needle from a pack that I got at Walmart, but if you don't have one this big, that's okay. You can just get a larger eyed needle, and as long as it's longer than the ornament itself, you'll be able to do this project. So once you make your garland the length that you want, at the end I'm going to attach this coordinating wooden ornament from the Dollar Tree, and it already has a hole at the top, so this is super easy to add, and then just wrap it around and make a bunch of knots so that it's nice and secure. And then I'm going to take my black yarn and make a tassel by wrapping it around my fingers and getting it to the size that I want. And then I'm going to take my jute twine that's at the end of the other side and feed that through there, and then tie another knot so that it's completely secure. And then I'm going to take another piece of black yarn and just wrap that around the top part of my tassel about 3 or 4 times, tie that into a knot, and then give it a haircut at the bottom so that it's nice and even. And here it is, all finished, and this was such an easy garland to do. I love the buffalo check in the red and black, and the hard work is already done for you. I added a sweet little bow and some pretty greenery to the top of my ornament just to give it a little more cuteness, but I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For our next project, I'm using 3 of these gift boxes, and I think these are for wine because they're super heavy duty and tall and skinny, so I'm just guessing that's what they're for. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure down 3 inches from the top of each of my boxes and then draw a line all the way around, and that's going to give me a guide to know where I'm going to stop in my cutting. So I want to turn these boxes into houses, and on my first one I found the middle of the top edge and used a ruler to connect that point with my 3-inch line, and then drew a line to make the angled rooftop. And then I cut that, leaving about a 1/2 inch so I could score and fold it in for a cleaner edge. And I did that on the front and back of my box, and then on the remaining corners I cut straight down to my 3-inch line and used a craft knife to score and fold those down to make the sides of my roof. But after I did the first one and folded those sides in, I realized I didn't even have to measure that first peak of my house, because all I have to do is fold those in, and then using my pencil I'll just make the lines myself and then cut around those, leaving that 1/2 inch extra part. Now you'll see once we put these together that the rooftop will have a little gap at the very peak of my roof, but I knew I was going to be covering them with some snowy goodness, so I didn't really mind, and I'm going to address that in just a second. So once I had my roofs cut and ready to put together, before I close them up, I cut out some windows, and you'll want to use a sharp craft knife to do this, or you'll get some pretty rough edges like I had here. So I sanded them down to get a smoother finish, and then I'll glue my roofs closed. And I was kind of having a hard time with my sandpaper, so instead I took a sanding block and cut that down so I would have a straight edge to sand my windows. And you may notice that the insides of these boxes are red, and I really wanted to showcase that because I'm decorating in red and white this year. So if you do this project the way I'm doing it, you do want to make sure and be mindful of the color that's inside, because that is going to show. So now, in order to get rid of that gap at the top, I kind of had to figure it out in my brain after the fact. But if I would have just cut the line that I made when I folded those 2 sides together and not left that 1/2 inch allowance, it would have matched perfectly and you wouldn't have that gap. So now I'm going to paint all 3 of my boxes completely white with my chalk paint, and I wanted to make sure I didn't have any drippies go into the windows and onto my red, because again, those are going to show. And I had a smaller box that I'm going to use in the middle. I couldn't find 3 of the same, so I thought that was a little bit cuter, and I cut those windows out a little bit differently. So now I'm going to take some craft sticks, and this is where we're going to cover our little gap. I'm going to be using some batting to make faux snow on top of the roofs, but that gap did show through the batting, so that's why I'm going to take a craft stick and cover that up and glue that right on top after I paint it white. So now I'm going to take 3 of these LED push lights from the Dollar Tree, and you can see I'm doing this out of order and while my craft sticks are drying, but I'm going to trace around my light and then use a craft knife to cut that circle, because you know we love lights, and I'm going to light these houses up in the end. So then I'm going to take my scrap batting and I'm going to attach that to the top of my roof, and I just folded it in 2 so that I got a little more coverage, and then use my hot glue gun to glue all the way around my roof, and then I'll cut off the excess to make it fit perfectly. And then to add some sparkly Christmas cuteness, I'll use some Dollar Tree spray adhesive to spray onto the batting, and then add some glittery snow on top. And then I'm going to take some of my frosty greenery and cut off the tips, and I'll hot glue those to the points of the rooftops. And then I took some red and white baker's twine, wrapped it around my fingers 2 times, and then used another piece to tie that together and make a sweet little bow, glued that to the middle, and added some berries from a holly stem right in the middle. And then I used some more of the baker's twine to wrap at the bottom of my outside houses and tied it in the back. And now I'll push my lights on and place my houses on top, and then added some mini trees and a cute little red sleigh ornament to my display. And here they are, all lit up, and that red just pops on my white shelf. And if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you may know we're decorating in red this year because it's my mom's favorite color, and she's been suffering with a sudden onset of major short-term memory loss. So every time she comes into the room, she's seeing the decorations for the very first time with this childlike excitement that's just, I don't know, kind of humbling and eye-opening at the same time. But she's so happy we're using reds and keeps reminding us that's her favorite color. But it's also taught me personally that I need to see the beauty in all things with new eyes and a childlike appreciation for what God has given us. And especially during this season, because He gave us His only begotten Son. So I'm still working on my home tour video, but as pretty as this corner is, my eyes kept going to this gray and white chevron pattern on my mom's piano bench, which needs to be replaced anyway, so I decided to cover it temporarily with some red fabric I had. But I didn't want it to be just completely solid red, so I decided to add some flour sack stripes by using some tape and my white chalk paint, and just covered the top of the bench using my staple gun. And then I used my white paint pen to write, "I played my best for him," where my stripes intersect. And this would be an easy way to get some Jesus into a room. If not on a piano bench, you could cover any kind of bench, but you could make this into a pillow cover or a banner on the wall. My dog keeps walking by, so I don't know if you can hear her, but it just gives another Christmassy finishing touch to any holiday decor. That was right. For this Dollar Tree DIY, I'm using 4 of the 24-inch Christmas signs, 6 Dollar Tree placemats, and a glittery red reindeer. And I'm attaching my signs with some giant craft sticks from Walmart, and I kind of had a little brain toot and did it on the wrong side at first, so I had to pull those off and then replace them. So now I'm going to cover my boards with the placemats, and there's one seam I can still see, so if you paint your boards white first, that might go away. But I should have overlapped that piece like I did on the rest of it so it doesn't show at all. But do as I say and not as I do. So now that my board's completely covered, I'm going to dress up my Mr. Reindeer, and I'm going to use some greenery from another ornament and just pull things apart so that I can add it to his neck. And then I took some ribbon from Walmart and made a sweet little bow and tied it in the middle with a chenille stem. And then I'll take another piece of ribbon and tie that around his neck and just tie it into a knot and let those 2 tails hang over and cut those at an angle. And then he'll have 4 little tails just to make it even cuter. And then I'll attach my bow to the ribbon using that extra chenille stem, and then add my greenery, some pine cones, and a little red bell. Next, I took a metal sign and painted it with a couple coats of my white chalk paint and set that aside to dry. And I thought the white would show up better than just leaving it in the metal finish on top of the red. So I had planned to frame this out with some 5/8 inch white grosgrain ribbon, which still would have been cutie patootie, but I decided I wanted to give it a more substantial frame and use some 1x1 wood pieces, which, by the way, why do they call it that when it's really only 3/4 of an inch? I don't know. I don't say I'm 5 feet tall since I'm only 4'11 3/4, so why do they lie? Anyway, I'm going to paint my boards white, and then I'm going to attach my frame to the back of my sign with some permanent adhesive, and then I'll just shoot some staples from the back and get those attached, and then I'll flip it over and put my reindeer on the front and glue my Believe sign right in the middle of that, and it's done. And here it is all finished, and I love this so much. I love that pop of red on the black and white. I am going to go back in and add a strip across that one seam that's showing and some of my glue spots because I do want to use this in our bedroom, but I still love it and I hope you guys like it too. I hope you enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Remember the reason for the season. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!